let's go. Mimi, can we have our poem? That'd be wonderful.
We can, and we will. I switched gears for today because as a Jewish peacenik who was in the streets in Israel in 1987 during the first uprising, and continued peace work for Palestinians and Israelis, I wanted to read this particular poem because I'm at my wit's end, and I'm sure many people here are as well. So I'm taking the Buddhist approach, which is how I wrote this poem, which is from my book, War Poems, Israel, Gaza, the First 100 Days of Carnage. The other day, 2 days ago, we passed the 700th day of genocide and carnage in Gaza. This poem is called War Poem number 37. Place your burden and yours, and yes, yours, all the sorrow, tears, scars, blood, all the devastation of war and longing for peace into this basket of pomegranate seeds woven in fractals of flowers. Let us mix them and then spill to earth these burdens, that all the burdens are one burden, a collective burden, undifferentiated by place or culture, but the burden belonging to all of humanity.
Whoa. Thank you for that, Mimi. Much appreciated. And
You.
we do have the basket of the burden of all humanity here, and we are going to discuss getting some hearts floating by there. We're going to go ahead, Mike. I do want to welcome Karen to the call. Karen, if you are who I think you are, we just saw each other in the Nature Conservancy with your dog. That's the first, and it's great to see you with us, Karen. So many others, great people with us. Let's go. Mike Hersh, you want to introduce Nancy DeParco, and then we're going to go with Andra Watkins to talk
Well,
about.
Sluggo, if you remember, we need to get Chuck Pinocchio on because he's kind of in,
All right.
gracing us between doctor's appointments. So, Chuck, if you could, I don't want to cut into your time, but for anybody who doesn't know Chuck Pinocchio, he's a professor emeritus, a great thinker, a scholar, an organizer, a champion of progressive issues and values. And just take it away, Chuck.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Mike, and appreciate it, Harvey. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity just to kind of lay out some thoughts that we can continue. This is an ongoing discussion. I'll come back on video. This is obviously about fascism in America. The first thing to say is that fascism is here. And anybody who denies it is simply not paying attention. And I make a distinction between those who operate with eyes wide open and those who operate with eyes wide shut. I'm just coming off a lunch with a dear friend, a political activist in the single payer movement. I'll leave his name out of it. And I told him that, I have an anti-fascism website and a pro-democracy website and a single payer website. And therefore, I'm a target. I live in Washington, D.C. I was at that march over the weekend. By the way, there were about, I'd say it was 90% plus white. Very few brown people were out in the streets. And you know why. We should all know why. Because we're in the midst of fascism. I'm living in an occupied city. At the moment, I'm in Philadelphia getting my medical treatments. But the point is that this reality has arrived in America. It started with a coup on January 6, 2021, and it's an ongoing coup. And who doesn't see that? People who don't want to see that. The vast majority of Democrats. We're not going to get the Democratic Party stepping forward and challenging. In fact, the Democratic Party is complicit. The Democratic Party is appeasing. The Democratic Party is is aiding and abetting the continuing rise of fascism. We need to say this reality. And what I'd like to say today is that really to begin this conversation, that we cannot allow ourselves as intelligent, thoughtful students of history, activists with eyes wide open, we cannot allow this to continue. We cannot allow it to continue. And I sent around a few weeks ago when I was announcing that I'd be coming back, an article which is entitled Fascism 101. See it, say it, define it, defeat it. And let me just say that we need to see it, again, eyes wide open. We can't be in denial. I made reference to a lunch I had earlier today, and my friend said, Chuck, what are you worried about? You're an American citizen. Yeah, tell that to German citizens in the 1930s. Tell that to Italian citizens in the 1920s. Tell that to Portuguese citizens. Tell that to Spanish citizens. Tell that to any number of other societies that have gone into fascism, because fascism knows no boundaries. Fascism is all about power. For 30 years, I taught politics and the media, politics and consumerism, and I always had my students read Machiavelli's The Prince. And The Prince really is the starting point, I believe, for understanding modern politics, which now leans into the gross excesses that we're experiencing of fascism. And that is that in terms of defining it, it is about power. It's all about power. It's all about acquiring it, consolidating it, and expanding it. And that is precisely what's going on, has been going on since January 6, 2021, the capture of all these institutions. The ground game was set back in 1971, many of you know, with the Powell Memo, and the updated version of that is Project 2025. And it's happening in real time. We have Gestapo in the streets. That is ICE. They're backed up by the National Guard. This is a direct violation of the Constitution, and yet it's going on. And the Democrats are basically saying politics as usual. That's our response. Let's just fundraise for 2026, see how that goes. And rarely do you find a Democratic politician actually saying it what it is. That's why we have to do it. It's incumbent upon us. So the core ideology here of Machiavellianism is amorality, right? Not to be confused with morality or immorality, but amorality. It's an ideology devoid of morality. It's an ideology that uses all tools in the toolbox. And it operates, as you all know the expression, ends justifies the means. The pursuit of power justifies any and every means used. Legal, extra legal, it doesn't matter. That's what fascism is. And we need to understand that that's what's happening here in the United States. And that's what's happened in all these other countries that I cited. In Italy and Germany and Spain and Portugal and so forth, and Hungary, you know, to bring an example up to the present. I mean, the EU has written numerous letters of concern to Orban in Hungary, but has never actually taken it on. Poland was saved from going into fascism because the media stood up. There are occasions when we can defeat the fascism, but once it comes through the democratic process, once it's democratically elected, there's no getting fascism out without using extra legal means, force. And that's the problem that we face here in the United States, is we've never seen this in our own country, and we can't imagine that it could happen here or that it is happening here. So eyes wide open. This is the most important thing that we can do, is understand what is really happening. The most that the politicians are doing right now is holding town halls. I work very closely with Ro Khanna on our state-based universal health care legislation. And Ro is out there telling us that the town halls, that's the secret. That's how we're going to get power back. He's not operating with eyes wide open. And yeah, I'm calling them out. And Bernie and AOC, they're out there saying that we have to fight the oligarchs. It's more than just the oligarchs. It has to be understood that this is a culture war that is being weaponized by the billionaire class, and they are all in with the takedown of power and control of all of our institutions. So that the Democrats are engaged again in nonstop fundraising for 2026. And just to cite another example of the complicity, the Democrat establishment, especially New York-based Democrats who refuse to endorse Mamdani, are effectively appeasing the fascism, and in fact, refuting the democratic will of the voters of New York City. This is where we are right now. So the question is, what can we do and what should we do? The first thing, again, is see it, say it, define it, and defeat it. Become the leader in your own world. Look in the mirror. You are the leaders that we've been looking for. We've got to carry this message forward. I'll drop some links in the chat that will take you over to my website. There are a lot of resources over there. I could get into a lot of depth on a lot of this, but I'd actually like to hear some of your thoughts, what you're seeing and what you're saying and how you are acting. I think it's important that we share a conversation in this community of excellent folks that have come together. And I really would appreciate your own thinking. Just so you know, this is what I've been studying for the last and teaching for the last 30 plus years, from undergraduate years through several colleges where I taught. And I've seen creeping fascism coming at us for a very, very, very long time. And now it's here. And we need to deal with the reality. So the final thing I'm just going to offer up, and then we'll take questions, comments, is we have to be strategic. It's not enough simply to take on the fascism by all and every means. And that means occupy. That means understand that every dollar that we spend is a political decision. We've got to pull back from supporting Jeff Bezos. We have to stop using Amazon. We have to buy from alternative bookstores. We have to do things that actually shift the economic power. At the same time, we need to be moving in the streets, and we need to be connecting our actions in a strategic way. And that means visioning a world after the fascism where we see a justice for all world. If we don't see justice on the other side of this, it's very difficult to strategize. It's very difficult to operate in the present, because what we need to do in the present is build coalitions. We need to think in terms of bringing in new models of leadership. We need to connect with one another, and we have to stop staring up at the supposed leaders in our political society and look in the mirror and realize that we're the ones that need to be doing this work. So without getting into any really more detail, there's a whole lot more to talk about. I would just love to hear what you all have to say.
Well, very good, Chuck. We really appreciate that. I want to point out that today the Supreme Court, 6-3, approved random pickups and arrests, basically saying if you've got brown skin, they can pick you up and throw you wherever they want. So that's a major step towards fascism. We do have 80 people with us, and we also have ANDRA WATKINS with us, who's going to talk to us a bit about the MAGA movement. But very well stated, Chuck. Much appreciated. Mike Hersh, you want to jump in, and then Dr. Nancy, and then
Well,
Lynn.
I want to honor Lynn. She had her hand up first.
Go ahead, Lynn, please.
Lynn is a show host herself, and she's got a great program that she does, and with a lot of guests, and she's a terrific thought leader. Lynn, if you could share what you have for Chuck.
Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate that. Yeah, my response is that, Chuck named January 2021 as the date of the coup d'etat in the United States. Well, I name November 1995 as the date of the coup in Israel. And that was the time at which Macbeth and Yahoo, sorry, I can't refer to him as anything else, murdered or had murdered Yitzhak Rabin. And from that time, the fascist Jewish extreme right consolidated its totalitarian control over Israel. And we have what we have today, which is an expansionism that is cloaked in fascism, which has no empathy, which emphasizes cruelty. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the basis of our conversation with both ANDRA WATKINS and all the other people on this particular program. I would be happy to introduce ANDRA when
okay, that'll be great.
Have finished.
Please. Mike, did you we had someone else with a hand before Lynn can introduce ANDRA, but ANDRA is an invited guest. Mimi, did you want to jump back in here? And then we'll go to Lynn to introduce me, ANDRA.
I do. And I want to add, Lynn, to what you said, where for me in the United States, a fascist takeover began with Portland, Oregon, the mayor, Ted Wheeler. Actually, he was 2017, so it was before him, allowing the Proud Boys from Vancouver, Washington to come in and march on our streets. And I had many meetings on the phone, in letters to the mayor saying, you have to prevent this. And the ACLU would come out with a statement saying that what the Proud Boys want to do is freedom of speech. You know, they weren't condoning the Proud Boys, but they were saying this, right? So they put the statement out that if they are prevented from coming in, then they're going to have to sue. Well, I said to Wheeler, I said, you need to get a handle on the cops, tell them that they cannot allow the Proud Boys in, even though half the cops are Proud Boys and whatever other Nazi associations in Portland, but also get in the street yourself and be that guy. Be the politician who says, I will not allow fascism to come into our city, and allow every other mayor in every other city across America to follow suit. And he said to me, Mimi, are you saying that I should let myself get arrested? And I said, is that where your head's at? So for me, it's not just about us fighting back in whatever way we can. It's about making sure that every single politician who is next elected, if there's even an election for any office, that they get in, that only those who get in are willing to say and to be present against fascism completely. And that's what Mayor Heidi's doing as well. And I just wanted to plug Mayor Heidi
Well, very
Lambert.
quickly, you told me, Mimi, we've been following the fight in Waldport, Oregon, for those of you who are new or haven't been involved with this, where a small town on the coast of Oregon, the MAGA City Council tried to throw out a duly elected mayor, and she has been fighting back. And the Waldport is about to experience, as far as we know, the first recall of an entire city council with a wonderful progressive mayor, Mayor Heidi, who we call America's mayor. Do you want to very quickly tell me more about that? And then we're going to go to Andra Watkins.
Sure. Thanks, Sluggo. I think that the main thing out of all the details that are still happening is there's a MAGA city council who told the entire coalition of indigenous tribes who help communities along the Oregon coast that they are wrong in their decision making regarding certain things, and they should do things the way that these white people tell them that they should do them. And the tribes are actually considering suing the city council, not Heidi, but the council. And
Okay.
To get to the crux of it, we're very, very close to having enough signatures to recall all of the city council except for the mayor, and that's Mayor Heidi. And if this happens, it will be the first time in America that an entire MAGA city council has been tossed out because of their MAGA actions.
Directly into the ocean, I might add.
And Sluggo, if I could really, really quickly. First of all, thanks so much for that update, Mimi. And Sluggo, both you and Mimi are using the term MAGA. Please don't, because that stands for Make America Great Again. That's not an insult. You're playing into their propaganda meme. And I just want to, while we still have Chuck with us, how long can you stay, Chuck?
Okay.
Yeah, for another 10 minutes would be great. Yeah, I love all the comments so far.
Yeah, because what I
Well,
wanted
I think
to bring,
you should be introduced to Andra Watkins real quick.
Absolutely. So,
go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Well, hold
Lynn?
on, Sluggo. I'd like to make a quick comment. Then we'd like to get to Andra, and then Chuck is only here for about 10 minutes. I want to point out that the history of the West vis-a-vis fascism is not what you would normally, not what we would like to think. It's not what it should have been. What happened was, fascism rose first in Italy and Spain, and Spain had a civil war, and a lot of the Western powers were ambivalent and let Franco rise to power. And when Hitler saw that the West was impotent and complicit, like Chuck was saying, complicit, Democrats are complicit. Think about what that word means. It's very important to remember. Do not count on people who are complicit to fight for you. They will not. They are complicit. And history will keep repeating itself. The West did not rise up to put down Franco. And when Hitler and Mussolini saw the impotence and the complicity of the Western leaders, they were emboldened, and they decided to take it upon themselves to push as far as they could. That's what fascism does. There's no off switch. Okay. And here's something that it struck me. Maybe other people have kept this in mind, but it struck me that even after World War II, after fascism was responsible for tens of millions of deaths, Franco was allowed to live out his life in control of a Western nation. He was left in place in Spain. Now what we're told in the history books is he was neutral during war. Yeah, right. He was a fascist. What we have to understand is that the business leaders, a lot of government leaders, thought leaders in the United States, Great Britain, now UK, France, et cetera, are soft on fascism, always were, always will be. They're much more tough on the left.
Yes, they
Chuck,
are.
Chuck, I'd like you to weigh in on that. And I saw Andra was also nodding. So, Lynn, I guess if you wanted to introduce Andra and Chuck, you need to put your heads together because you're both two of the most brilliant minds on the subject.
So Lynn Feinerman, if you'd like to introduce Andra, I do, and then Chuck will jump right in with Andra, so you'll be on the same page. I do want to mention one shocking thing that this guy, the commentator from Maine, has actually come out and said that during World War II, the United States should have joined with Hitler to fight Stalin. What is this horrible guy's name? Supporter of Trump. Anyway, you'll think of it. I'll think of it. But I have been absolutely floored to see this guy with a huge following question the side that we were anti-fascist in World War II and we should have been aligned with Hitler. An astonishing point. Tucker Carlson. I can barely say the name. Tucker Carlson came out, has been consistently on his show, questioning that we were fighting Hitler instead of fighting Stalin during World War II. An astonishing moment. Lynn Feinerman, do you want to go ahead, please, and introduce Andrea, and then we'll go back?
Yes, it is my honor to introduce Andra Watkins. Andra is a New York Times bestselling author, a wonderful writer, very inspired. Andra is a willful survivor of the Jerry Falwell moral majority movement of the 1980s. In 2022, I believe it is, you can correct me, Andra, she began researching and writing on Project 2025 because she realized that not too many people, it wasn't on too many people's radar. Women Rising Radio, my program, did a wonderful program prior to the just prior to the 2024 election called How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. That was the title of Andra's Substack until she changed it to For Such a Time as This. And I am delighted to introduce Andra. There you are.
Andrea, welcome. We have 84 people, and of course, we are live streamed on YouTube and the whole deal. So glad to have you with us, please.
Thanks for having me. I was I was shaking my head because I live part-time in San Sebastian, Spain, which is northern Spain, about an hour from Guernica, which Franco allowed Hitler to bomb in the lead up to World War II, and hundreds or thousands of people were killed during that bombing that we don't hear about. So Franco was very complicit in helping Hitler test some of his methods for waging war as a fascist. So it's quite sobering to visit that city. Most of it's very new because it was bombed into oblivion, and very little of the actual historic fabric remains because of that. So it's a very sobering place to go. So that's why I was shaking my head. Franco was very complicit in that. But y'all usually ask me to be here to talk about aspects of Christian nationalism as a group of people who maybe don't have a lot of experience with Christian nationalism. That's a lot of what I spend my time talking about. So from my perspective, they've been working on this coup since the 70s, as Chuck said. Part of the moral majority movement was a means to partner with the Heritage Foundation, which started in 1979, who are the authors of Mandate for Leadership, which produced Project 2025. That's the real title of it, is Mandate for Leadership. So, they started producing these things in 1979. This has been something that they've been working on for close to 5 decades. It really is, in my view, having grown up in the South, a continuation of the Southern strategy and trying to, force that thing that we already fought one civil war about on the rest of the country. So when I talk about these issues, I talk about it from that perspective and try to help people understand the Christian nationalist elements behind it. When we first started talking about me being on here, Harvey, you were talking about gun violence and the lack of empathy that Christian nationalists tend to have. That has spread into our government because we have a number of radicalized Christian nationalist extremists in our government now, and that's what I call them. They are highly radicalized people. They are extremists, and we should be calling them that. One of the things that I constantly try to say to groups like this is religion is not a third rail. We have every right to be calling out radicalized extremists in religion. And just because they're Christians doesn't mean we can't do that. We should be doing that at every opportunity. I think sometimes it's hard to do it because you don't know what you're looking at. So that's a lot of what I write about and try to educate people about on my Substack. Here's the language they speak. Here's what they mean when they say things. Here's what their goals and objectives are. And so I can answer any questions about that you want. But their attacks on empathy and compassion stem from how they're taught. Christian nationalists use Jesus Christ as a fire escape. They accept him for their salvation, and then they worship vengeful, angry Old Testament God. Vengeful, angry Old Testament God smote people, destroyed whole cities, who displeased him. And that is who Christian nationalists worship. So vengeful, angry Old Testament God wasn't about empathy or compassion. Vengeful, angry Old Testament God would destroy a whole city because 2 people committed adultery, and nobody stopped them and called them out and punished them. So this is very much the attitude that someone like Doug Wilson has, who's written a book against empathy, or Allie Beth Stuckey has, who's another Christian nationalist, radicalized extremist influencer who's written a book against empathy. So when you want to understand why Jesus Christ's whole life was empathy and compassion, and how can these people be the opposite of that, that's why, because they don't really worship Jesus Christ. They worship vengeful, angry Old Testament God. And then they put white men in the position of being gods on earth and interpreting what vengeful, angry Old Testament God really meant in the Bible, so that they can be many gods and many dictators who enforce that vengeful, angry Old Testament vision of God and God's law on the American people. It's theocratic fascism. The goal of Project 2025, as I wrote about it, was to create a theocratic fascist government and replace our democracy with that. At the time, it sounded insane and way out there. And a lot of people said they'll never be able to do that. And we're watching them do it every day. And Chuck is right. Democrats aren't going to save us. The donors aren't going to save us. We are going to have to save ourselves. And part of that is understanding the enemy that we're up against. And that's the aspect of the enemy that I'm an expert on and that I talk about. Chuck, I know you need to go, so I want to lend the floor to you before you have to check out.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah.
I've always wondered what would happen if Jesus Christ turned up at a MAGA rally.
They'd arrest him. They'd kidnap him and disappear him and deport him today.
Okay, I wanted to get that clear. Chuck, go ahead.
Right, and the fact is he was a brown man, so that's pretty quick, right? So yeah, Andra, that was brilliant, and Lynn, appreciate your comments and the earlier comments. This is really great. I dropped into the chat an article I wrote about fascism. I have an anti-fascism website. Check it out. A lot of resources. Andra, please check it out. I would love for you to add new material. Catherine Stewart's "Money, Lies, and God" is a book I recently. She's really good on this topic as well, Andra, and I really appreciate your thinking. I love your and I love your repetition. Angry, vengeful, Old Testament God. That's really wonderful. Really nails it. 3 cornerstones. Yeah, Christian nationalism, white supremacy, and corporate socialism or social statism or state corporatism, I should say, which is where Mussolini started his definition. But let me just finish with this, and this sort of reinforces what Mike said. I'll be real quick. The pattern here in terms of the rise and the enabling of fascists is really captured by so-called conservatives. And I would argue that the establishment Democrats are part of a conservative coalition that is in fact enabling fascism. And they're doing so with wings of the Republican Party, the billionaire class, the donor class, all of these that we talk about. The pattern is really so consistent, it's almost funny if it weren't so terrifying. Every single time it goes like this. Conservatives panic about communism, socialism, or progressivism. Does that sound familiar? They ally with fascists as the lesser evil. Fascists then take power. Fascists immediately purge the conservatives who help them. Then it's years before that dictatorship is finally pushed out of power. This happened in Germany, Italy, Spain, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Greece, Portugal, Croatia, Romania, and now Hungary. You want to know how many times conservatives can successfully control the fascists? 0. Want to know how many times the fascists purged the conservatives after taking power? Every single time. And here's the part that breaks your heart. Violence works for them. Fascists use violence while claiming to be victims. They create chaos that requires the authoritarian solution. Then they purge anyone who opposes them. Meanwhile, small d Democrats keep insisting on following rules that fascists completely ignore. They file lawsuits, they write editorials, they vote on resolutions, and fascists just laugh and keep consolidating power. The statistics are brutal. Fascists take power and they never relinquish it. They never relinquish it without a fight. The only way they're pushed out of power in almost all cases is by war or military coups and a massive uprising of the people. That's where we are. And this is something that we really have got to internalize and understand that it's got to be a mass movement, a mass movement. I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7%. The numbers of the people in the streets is about 1.5% right now. So I think we need to triple, quadruple that number in order actually to occupy and force and shame these politicians ultimately into doing the right thing. But it's not about elections ultimately. It's about capturing power by all means necessary short of violence. So I'll finish there. And again, thank you all. You're wonderful folks. Love to come back, keep the conversation going, keep growing, and be the voice. Be the voice of truth, the voice of honesty. Be that ounce of courage that is lacking in all these politicians who lack even one slice of honesty. This is really important, the work that you're doing. So thank you again so much, Harvey and Mike, Andra, Lynn, and others. Wish you all well, and I'll be back to check in again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and put all your stuff in the chat there before you go, Chuck. And I do want to mention in the second hour today, we want to discuss the fact that nuclear power is fascist power. And, it's one of the foundations of these calls is the opposition to atomic energy and the demand for renewables. And renewable energy is very much tied with democracy, small d democracy, and nuclear power is total fascism. and that's a big piece of the puzzle here. I will also say, as an old guy, that the real fascism for a lot of us, and in my mind still after all these years, really began in America with the murder of John Kennedy. And you know, the killing of JFK and the fact that it's not really solved, although we have our ideas. But that really, to me, is the root of when this country really started to go down the tubes to the right. Let's go back to Andra, and then we'll move on to some other hands. Thank you for that, Chuck. Andra, please.
Okay, so if anybody has questions for me about Christian nationalism, how they think, what they believe, what they push, what you don't understand about some aspect of it, please throw it up here and I'll try to answer it before I have to hop off at 6 o'clock. I grew up in Christian nationalism, for those of you who haven't met me before, in a small town in South Carolina. If you can't tell by now, I've always lived in the southern US until very recently. We'll always have a southern accent. So, you know, I went from kindergarten through 12th grade in a Christian nationalist church and school in rural South Carolina. It was one of those segregationist schools that were started in the wake of the civil rights movement, so that all these racists wouldn't have to send their children to school with Black people. You know, people often ask me how Christian nationalists can be white supremacists or align with white supremacists, and it's really more that they are white supremacists. So there is really no difference between Christian nationalists and white supremacists, other than Christian nationalists also carry a cross and bang people over the head with the Bible, whereas white supremacists might not do that. But white supremacy is very baked into Christian nationalism. So I was indoctrinated in that. I attended Liberty University my freshman year of college.
Wow.
So I was
That's the nitty gritty there, Liberty University.
Yeah, I didn't graduate from there, thankfully, but I did attend my freshman year. So, you know, all of my experiences with this come from the first 3 decades of my life, and I've gotten out of it. But it's really horrifying. I remember the day that I thought, I'll never have to think about the rapture and the end of the world again. And then just a few years later, I pick up Project 2025 and start reading it. And I'm like, oh my God, now we have one of those people as the ambassador to Israel. You know, Mike Huckabee is doing our entire foreign policy with Israel on Bible prophecy and end times beliefs of the Baptist theocratic Christian nationalist fascist movement. Mike Johnson is one of those as well. Mike Pompeo was one of those as well. You know, when I've talked about this before, but they want to rebuild the temple because of Bible prophecy. So when Pete Hegseth addressed a group in Israel in 2017 to help fundraise to build the temple, he's one of these Christian nationalists who believe in this apocalyptic stuff. So we have all these people in government now who are driving our foreign policy based on biblical end times apocalyptic beliefs and not on actual foreign policy. And these were things that I heard about regularly and had nightmares about as a child. So, you know, but people do actually believe it. So these are highly radicalized, extremist people. And Chuck is right. We're not going to defeat them by, you know, voting them out, most likely. They're not going to leave willingly. These are people who have been trained to be authoritarians, to not tolerate anyone who disagrees with them, to never compromise, because God's law is perfect, the Bible is perfect, and you can never compromise with someone on what the Bible says, what they say the Bible says. So there's no compromising with them. They cannot compromise. I mean, Sam Alito was caught on a hot mic saying that. So we have people on the Supreme Court who have been indoctrinated into this thinking, who believe that they cannot compromise. He's in the Opus Dei faction of the Catholic faction of this Christian nationalist movement, because there are different factions.
Well,
so,
that's
you know,
Steve Bannon is in Opus Dei as well, right?
Yes, he is as well. Yes. So is JD Vance.
Steve Bannon has really, much to our great pleasure, has really hated the last two popes. He hated Francis, and now he hates Leo as well, right?
Yes, no, I mean, there's a faction in the Opus Dei group that don't recognize any pope since they had the new rules for Catholicism be enacted. And I don't remember what that's called because I'm not Catholic, but
Vatican,
somebody here may remember.
Well, they like,
Vatican II.
yes,
Vatican II, yeah.
but they liked Benedict. Benedict was actually an ex-Nazi, right?
Yeah,
So
they liked him.
before we move ahead, can you explain the Christian nationalist view of sex and gender, and why are they so crazed about transgender people?
Okay. It's so funny. My husband was reared Catholic, and we were reared very differently. And so he didn't believe that people like my family existed until he married me. So he can come on and tell you that these people do exist. I was indoctrinated to believe that the Genesis story of Adam and Eve actually happened between 6,000 and 8,000 years ago. And God actually created Adam and actually created Eve out of Adam's rib. That we literally created the world, or he literally created the world in 6 literal 24-hour days and rested on the 7th day. And so a lot of what Christian nationalists and all of the camps believe traces back to believing that story as a literal story, not an allegory, not a metaphor, not a collection of other creation stories from other belief systems.
So is your husband missing a rib? Sorry, couldn't resist. Go ahead. Continue.
So my childhood pastor often liked to say that God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, or not Adam and some nebulous, non-gendered human being. So Christian nationalists, very much, it is biblical literalism, as Mike Hersh is saying in the comments, believe that because God only created Adam and Eve, and God doesn't make mistakes. When you look on social media, you will see Christian nationalists repeatedly use the phrase, God doesn't make mistakes, in relation to this idea. So, they believe that because God only created Adam and Eve, male and female, that is all that exists. They accept no other explanation. They will accept no other scientific data that shows that someone can present female and be scientifically male. They won't accept any of that. What your outward appearance is, what your outward sex organs are, what your visible body looks like, is what you were meant by God to be when you were born. And so they accept nothing else but that. They believe that that is the way God meant for it to be. And so they want to force their religious beliefs on everyone.
Okay.
And they will accept nothing else. My husband has given me a note to remind me to say they have the right to believe all these things. I say this often, but they don't have the right to force it on other people. And that's what they're trying to do. I mean, they have a right to believe that if they want to in a free society, but they don't have a right to make biblical laws that are drawn from their interpretation of the Bible and force everyone in society to live by them. And that's what Project 2025 was designed to do.
And I assume that extends to people who are gay.
Yes, it extends to people who are gay because God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Okay.
So, they're very literal about that. So even though you can make an argument that David was at least bisexual.
King David.
Because of his relationship with Saul's son, Jonathan. Right. And Father Nathan Monk has written a really great, and he is gay. So he's written a really great analysis on Substack of that relationship that, you can go read if you want to know more about that. But, there are possible examples in the Bible of homosexual relationships. The Bible says when Jonathan first met David, he immediately stripped naked and took all of his clothes off in front of him. So, you
They
know,
were they met at the Playboy Club, obviously. So
so, you know, I don't know what that means, but it's in the Bible. So, you know, whether it literally happened or not, I don't know.
well, I
But,
will
you
say
know,
I taught diversity at a college for 14 years, and my students were mostly Lutheran. And the only time my students ever got unruly and impolite was when I had a gay Unitarian preacher come in and say, and this guy really knew scripture, and he gave a whole lecture about how the Bible really does not outlaw homosexuality.
it
And
does
I
not.
had
It was
students,
not.
yes,
It was
I had
not a word
students.
in the Bible until 1948.
What's that again?
It was not a word in the Bible until 1948.
What word?
Homosexuality.
Well, I had students in my class who were the most meek, mild-mannered Lutherans you would ever meet, who were jumping up, screaming in my class that the Bible did, in fact, outlaw homosexuality. And my understanding is that the Bible, the New Testament or the Old Testament, neither one say anything about lesbianism. That
Well,
they're
It does
completely.
not.
we got people on stack. You could say the U.S. doesn't have the right to vote, but it's in the Constitution at least 4 times. But
Yes, it does.
Alex Williams got his hand up. These people have been waiting for a while here.
Okay, go ahead, Alex, please. Alex, are you unmuted? Ask to unmute, and I'll unmute Donald Smith, and I'll unmute Mike Hirsch. Go ahead, Alex, please.
Oh, who goes? Well,
I just unmuted.
Yeah,
You
go
hear me?
ahead. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm not going to get into all the religious stuff. That to me, that's pointless because none of this, what the fascists are doing, I think what fascists always do, and I think fascism began with the beginning of time, really, where the elite adopt the religion, which is puts people against one another, which it shouldn't do. The whole idea behind religion is to bring people together around God. But fascists always use that God as any kind of religion as a means of power control. You have the two. I look at it like you have on the really extreme left, the state becomes God itself, and on the extreme right, God gets co-opted by the state or by the fascist power brokers. And that one's always easier to do, whether it's Hinduism or Islam or Christianity. Of course, here it's going to be Christianity. And yeah, and then you throw racism on top of it, and that's the country's history right there. I mean, that's why they're always soft. I wrote something saying they were soft on the Confederacy. I mean, we had that little period of Reconstruction, then they went right back to fascism. And as already was stated, they were soft on Hitler. You know, he was in Time magazine as Man of the Year, you know.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Of course, we also had Uncle Joe Stalin on the cover of Life, but you know. And I will say though that much to my amazement, there have been Buddhist countries that have gone to war with each other.
Yeah.
You know, so and we do have authoritarian Buddhist countries. Thailand. If you in Thailand mispronounced the name of the king, which I will not even begin to try and do, you know, you could go to prison. So there must be something in the human genetic code along with religion wanders into fascism. Alex, is there anything else? I'll go to Donald.
One last thing. Going back to what I said about the religions, it could be any kind of religion. Usually they always co-opt, they twist what the actual religion and God is about is love. And they always twist it in with the Christian nationalists. It's based on that exclusionary, you got to be in part of the club to go to heaven. And if you're not in it, you're not going.
Right.
And, you know, you get saved and you're in, then you can make excuses for whatever you do because you're already saved. And, you know, that's Christian version of it. But every religion's got its own, you know, version of that.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. Much appreciated. And again, we want to veer back into sort of compassion and empathy. I know Dr. Nancy, we really want to take advantage of her expertise. Donald Smith, go ahead.
Okay. A couple of things. First, responding to the man who spoke before Andra, he was talking about the need to like rise up and fight fascism. And he says you can't do it peacefully. He sort of said that, then he said the opposite. I just wanted to point out that in America, unlike other situations, close to half the country, or loves MAGA, loves Trump, and support them. So, and they have the guns. And I'm not in favor of violence anyway, but our situation is unique because yes, we want to stop fascism, but there are actually a lot of people, hard to believe, a lot of Americans love Trump. And I think we have trouble realizing that. But anyway, I wanted to follow something up. One thing, I just finished reading a book, Heretic, about early Christianity. There were multiple Christian sects. It talks about the Gnostic Bibles, and there were all sorts of sects of Christianity. And when Christianity became the official Roman religion, they suppressed and actually had violently suppressed the other sects and destroyed their books. And so, even in ancient Christianity, talk about, I mean, when the state allies with religion, it becomes nasty.
Well, that started when Constantine became Christian in the early 300s. The Roman government switched from oppressing Christians to oppressing people who were not Christian.
Okay, so but the strange thing is Stephen Miller, he's Jewish for one thing. He's a mystery that he's working with the Christian fascists. And but you hear him talk, he is really dangerous. I mean, he says the Democrats are not a legitimate party, the Democrats are a terrorist group. And I heard him interview, I couldn't even watch the whole interview on Fox News with him. He says, the filthy Democrats, let the cities are overrun with crime. We need to crush them. I mean, Stephen Miller is a fascist Jew, which I don't know how this even happened.
It happened. I mean, we have it, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mike, did you want to say something? I want to get to Dr. Nancy. We have Carrie Orson and Erica Johnke, neither of whom I think have spoken before, and then we'll go to Dr. Nancy if she's still with us.
Yeah, I just want to make a real quick point. I've known CHUCK PENACCIO for decades now, and he did not call for violence at any point. He didn't call for violence and then change it. He said specifically, by all means necessary that are nonviolent. So I just want to make sure that, maybe there was a dropout in his connection or something. I'm not saying anybody's trying to misrepresent him, but he is 100% nonviolent. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. In the litany of nonviolent opposition to an authoritarian government, you know what the number one weapon is? Ridicule. And this is why Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and Rachel Maddow and these late night people are so critical. It's ridicule that is, among the people who know, people who've studied nonviolent opposition to fascist governments. That's where it's at. So fine with me. I love ridicule. It gives me something to watch after sports. Carrie Orson, Erica Johnke, Dr. Nancy, if you want to speak up, please do. I think you're co-host.
Okay, thank you so much. The one thing is, I wish we could find a different term, not call them Christian nationalists. They are not Christian because they're full of hatred. And what they believe about the Old Testament is a bunch of crap.
I agree.
Yeah, Adam and Eve, they were born. God did create them. I don't understand how, but I believe it, and I leave it at that. And everything with the Old Testament, all the ups and downs and violence and all that, it had to happen because it led up to the birth of Christ. That was God's plan. Not to, it wasn't to make a whole new government on earth for the Jews. That wasn't it. It was to lead up to Jesus' birth and his life and his resurrection. And you don't get to heaven because you're a good person. Nobody is. I'm not. I have to rely on God, and that's, you know, I believe in God. I know there's some on here that don't. I grew up Lutheran. My husband is a pastor, so it all leads up to that. And I believe that the Republicans and whatever we want to call the nationalists, the hateful nationalists, are like the Pharisees back in Jesus' day. They were very, very hateful of people that weren't like them. They had all these crazy, stupid rules. But just look at Jesus. You know, even if you don't believe Jesus existed, read the Bible and see how he treated everyone. It didn't matter who
Well,
they were.
I believe actually that I got arrested with Jesus at Seabrook. And you know that I've met many people very Christ-like in the Buddhist tradition and at the nonviolent demonstrations and all that stuff. So, but I'm sure he was the guy they dragged off right before me. So what can I tell you? You know. Anyway, very well stated. I appreciate that. Erica Johnke, I don't believe also you've not spoken with us, please. And we're going to keep going, by the way. It's 6 o'clock in the East, but we'll just go in. The second hour is going to be devoted to energy. We will make a segue, but this is very important, and we really got to get explicitly to compassion and empathy. So,
And Slugger, real
Erica?
quick, I think Andra mentioned that she can't stay for too
Oh,
much
you got to
longer.
go?
So,
Yeah, I need to check out here
so
directly.
if you
well,
could give us some closing thoughts and in response to what
and
you've
then we'll
heard,
go
that
to
would be
Erica. That'd be
great.
great.
And we would
Okay.
love to have you back again. I think you've just scratched the surface, and I've just been so intrigued and inspired by what you've said.
Go ahead, Andra.
One of the things that I think it's important for everyone here to understand is this is a very malignant movement, and that we need to confront this radicalized extremism everywhere we see it. One of the best places we can do that is in our local communities by going to town halls. Chuck was talking about some of these things, and speaking up and being louder than they are, and having more things to say than they do, canvassing, making connections in our communities with like-minded people to protect vulnerable populations as ICE and whatnot descends on our different communities. All of these fascist groups will be complicit in that. And so we have to band together to protect one another from that. I did not hear Chuck say anything about violence either. Those are the kinds of things that he was recommending that we do. Don't spend money, withhold our attention and our money from these fascists. So do that. Christian nationalists are a problem. Whatever we want to call them, I use that term because that's become the accepted term. And I always try to call them radicalized Christian nationalist extremists because that's what they are.
Well, when we I'll let you go, but when we confront someone and you say, speak to them, what do we say? What do you say to a Christian?
I don't bother confronting Christian nationalists to their faces at all anymore. It's a cult. They are hopeless. You're never going to deprogram them. What we have to do in group settings is stand up against them and say, we are not a Christian nationalist country. We were not founded with a state religion. We reject that. You were trying to force your Christian beliefs on everyone here, and we reject that. And we're not going to live under Christian laws that you or a bunch of white men interpret for us and enforce on us. We're not going to do that. And I would not let them anymore term things that way. Abortion bans are forcing people's religious beliefs on everyone.
I agree.
Telling somebody they cannot be transgender is forcing those religious beliefs on everyone. Telling somebody they cannot love who they love and marry who they love is forcing someone's extremist, radicalized religious beliefs on everyone. And the fact that we refuse to call that out as a society is part of why we're here. So you're not going to change them, but we have to show up in these spaces and say no to that repeatedly.
Okay. Well, we're going to keep going. I want to hear what we actually do stand for, and you laid a few of them, and let's keep going with that. Andra, thank you. You're great, and please do come back. Okay.
I will come back anytime. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care. Erica Janicki, and then I want to go to Dr. Well, Heidi hasn't spoken, and then I want to go to Dr. Nancy Naparko. I want to talk about compassion and empathy. Erica, please.
Hi. I think that she answered my question to some extent because my concern was that it might be too late. But I'm glad to hear that even with the pessimism expressed in this meeting, I'm glad to hear that people have some sense that we could do the right thing still. And in the spirit of the whole ridicule thing, Dan Savage would want me to point out that if the gay people had set up for people to be named, it would be Adam and Steven. So I wanted to, pass that quote on because I thought it was funny when I read it. So
Okay.
yeah, okay. So
Thank you,
my
Erica.
question was answered, but I thought I'd step in anyway. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Steve, then Heidi, then Dr. Nancy, if you're around. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Gandhi said this full spectrum of nonviolence is yet to be tested or fully explored. So God knows, anybody could come up with some God derivation of whatever to fix things nonviolently. So, we could lean on that as opposed to being violent, but, it is what it is. Thanks.
Well, I think to advocate nonviolence, to advocate violence on the left in the United States is really talking suicide. I mean, I think we're seriously outgunned. I've actually never held a gun,
Well,
since Boy Scouts, but I don't know. We
yeah,
don't win in that game. That's not a
they
winning
just
game.
arrested some guy for putting up violence online, but he had a house full of guns and they went after him. And, he said, well, I don't want to repeat what he said, but they definitely went after him and it was a violent statement. And, so just be careful out there.
No, that doesn't work for us. That hasn't worked for us. And we have to find a nonviolent answer. Of course, economics, general strike, that's been discussed a lot. And I think, we're getting there. It's actually Trump is the one who's calling a general strike by putting everybody out of business. And we can talk about that in a couple of minutes. Heidi and then Dr. Nancy, if you're with us. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Heidi Vertauer.
Yes, I would like to know what we can do to embody empathy as a movement, because it seems like I'm hearing a lot of talk about how we need to be us versus them and like not buy into the fascist ideals, and I believe that's true. I would have stood up for Germany, I mean, not for Germany, but against the Nazis, to be really clear about that. And I did study the Holocaust when I was in 6th grade. And, but I'm wondering what we can do to reach out I guess the part of it is within the communities. But how can we really embrace the other if we're so focused on being against something? Am I making myself clear
Yes.
enough?
Yes. I mean, do we have a program to feed everybody and house everybody and provide medical care and education for everybody? Those 4 points. I mean, one thing Franklin Roosevelt did, and then Dr. Nancy, you're next. My wife and I just watched a documentary on Franklin Roosevelt, and I'll segue this into compassion, and empathy, because this is what really distinguished him, along with his wife. Is Franklin Roosevelt was born very wealthy. He's a very good-looking guy, 6'2", 6'3". Everything that Earth could possibly provide to anybody was provided to Franklin Roosevelt. And in 2020, I'm sorry, 1920 or 21, he went sailing and he got a chill, and then he was passionate about fighting fires. And they were up in Campobello where it's cold. And he went and stayed in his bathing suit and he fought a fire. And he went to bed after that. And he woke up in the morning and never walked again. Now, you can make a case, and I just found this out. There had been a polio epidemic in New York City where he lived a few years earlier. And it's possible that he picked up the virus, but was strong enough to resist it. And then when his defenses were down in Campobello, he suddenly, the polio won, and he never walked again, but it put him through hell. And that's, in the long run, aside from the fact his wife was quite extraordinary and a great advocate of empathy and compassion. But that's why Franklin Roosevelt became such a great president, is because he was forced, as was Lincoln. Lincoln was a manic depressive. John Kennedy had his trials, having been wounded in World War II. The people who have the greatest empathy, who are leaders, seem to always have been through a crisis. Dr. Nancy, do you want to comment on that and take us into the world of compassion and empathy?
I will say about that she asked, what can we do? And I really believe that the nonviolent protest marches that are going on in America and around the world are pretty impressive. And I think it's going to show up in the election. Our hands are tied. It's not, the other thing is to get our legislators to do something. But what I really wanted to change the subject to is RFK.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Here's a hard right turn or hard left turn.
No, it's part of it, because RFK, his father was clearly a compassionate guy. And they were the embodiment. The Kennedys were in many ways the apparent embodiment of empathy and compassion in our public policy. If you close your eyes to the Vietnam War, but and when I think of Robert Kennedy Sr., I think of somebody who had compassion for the less privileged, and
Let's slow
that
down.
was
Let's talk about the difference. RFK, you may not know, but he started doing heroin, shooting up heroin at the age of 14 years old. He graduated at the age of 22 from Harvard. Okay, but he was on heroin for 15 years. That means to the age of 29. So he was shooting up heroin all through college and all through law school, which he graduated in 1928. This is a drug addict. I kind of want to, the worm in his brain is funny. It created a lot of jokes. It's called cysticercosis, and it's not the reason he's cognitively impaired. It really, I believe, his use of IV drugs is really underappreciated. I'm sure a scan would show that. But I listened to many, many clips of his being grilled by the Congress last week. And every one of them was a lie. It was amazing. And most importantly, the summary is he says there have not been studies on vaccines, which is absurd. There have always been blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled studies, and more so on the vaccines and COVID than anyone's before. And he sat there and said, I am going to have us do randomized placebo-controlled studies that have never been done. That's an outright lie.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, since 1995, I've seen more autistic kids than I think anyone else. I suspect that. And I think 1 out of thousands clearly was narrowed down to the day after the immunization. But he's really a fraud.
Well, I think this is part of the compassion and empathy discussion because Bobby Kennedy is right smack in the middle of our whole health debate. And are we having compassion for people with these diseases and with the poor? I mean, his father was known as an advocate of the poor. I will have to jump in here because I do have a personal connection to Bobby Kennedy. I met him sometime about 15 years ago, maybe. I spoke to the river keepers in San Francisco, and he and I walked in the Marin Headlands for a couple of hours. And I asked him, and he agreed to introduce Solartopia, which is the advocacy for a green-powered Earth. But there's a tremendous amount of pain in Robert Kennedy. I wrote a book after my parents died, a poem, and I sent it to him and asked him if he'd read it, and he told me basically that he has never dealt with the death of his father. He was 11 years old. He spent the morning, I believe, at the beach with his father, and then they were in LA, and then he was shot on national television that night. And, his very essence, Robert Kennedy, appears to me to be inner pain, and to the very sound of his voice. And so, that's why it was fine for you, Nancy, to bring Bobby Kennedy into this. But let's proceed with it. I will say I can't
But Harvey, back to the empathy.
yes.
I think one way in which you really establish true empathy is to understand nobody's completely bad. I've dealt with a lot of fundamental Christians and fundamental Jews, and a lot of them, especially sincere ones, no matter what they believe, they're really lovely people on some levels and in some ways. So, it's up to us to find those positive ways in which to connect.
Well, let's just throw this into a mix. We're going to continue this. We'll get to energy, Carl Grossman, I hope. But the big surprise lately to me is how much the MAGA movement, for lack of a better word, Mike, cares about this kitty, this childhood molesting thing. I thought that the whole Epstein thing would go away and that nobody would really care about it. The MAGA movement seems to really, really care. How are they going to react when there is definitive proof that Trump, in fact, molested these girls? I mean, it's obvious, it's so clear that this happened. What is the reaction going to be? I think, his numbers have dropped in the MAGA movement because everybody suspects that, in fact, he did partake in this miasma. And one other thing I want to throw in to the mix, Jeffrey Epstein was involved with Trump, not only with the girls. Jeffrey Epstein laundered Trump's money. And, with the Russians who came out of the Soviet Union, who brought their rubles to be laundered through Trump's real estate. And I know that sounds far afield, but that was part of how Jeffrey Epstein got so rich. And Trump is waist head deep in that, as well as with the women. So let's play that out, and we'll see
One thing that's tricky is this molestation, rape, whatever, crosses cultural wealth boundaries. I mean, it's in every fragment of our world, and people with power don't have to answer to it. How do you battle something that's intrinsic in our society?
I don't know. And we have a note in here from Carlos saying that they don't think it's going to stick with Trump, that he'll get out of it. They're sitting on it as long as they possibly can. There are 10 women who spoke today demanding, that they the files come out, but who knows what's really in the files? How have they cleaned them? And they're not going to release files that implicate Trump. That's not going to happen. And so is this going to go away just like Russiagate? And he's going to walk away and say he didn't do this? There have been women who've come forward. And by the way, the courts just upheld the libel, the financial settlement against him from the woman who claimed he raped her. So, that's one piece of the court puzzle. I'm going to get to Mike and Lynn in a minute, but Ruth Strauss has not spoken yet. Go ahead, Ruth, and then we'll go to Mike and
I have
Lynn.
to hold on.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm having computer problems, and so I was kind of on the
Well,
phone.
we empathize with your computer
Yeah,
problem.
okay. Well, anyway, so I hope I'm not repeating something that Nancy already covered, and
Go ahead.
I'm thrilled to know Nancy now because we're in a it seems like sometimes we're in a minority. But I wanted to tell people, one of the most frightening things I have ever seen in my life, this was 50 years ago. I've never forgotten it. I never will. I was in the pediatric rotation of my internship, and a professor came in with about a 4-month-old baby, maybe 6 months. And the baby had the most shrill cries. It was like nothing like a regular baby cry. It was just shrill. And the professor held a flashlight up to the baby's skull, and it transilluminated, meaning it was orange, meaning that there was no brain inside. There was just fluid. Or if there was brain, it was not visible. And this baby was the victim of what's called congenital rubella, meaning that the mother had contracted measles while the baby was in utero. And that is what happened. The baby's head was affected in such a way that it was filled with fluid, with either compressing the brain or no room for the brain to grow. It was the most shocking thing I have ever seen in my life. And there are all sorts of other defects that happen, heart defects, etc. So this business of, measles vaccine, and everybody here I know is very educated, so they know about the cases in Texas. Actually, Bobby Kennedy was trying to treat those cases with vitamin A. Some of those people got hypervitaminosis A, meaning they had too much in their system. I saw someone have a liver transplant at UCLA when I was doing my cardiology fellowship because her mother gave her too many vitamins. Now, so it turns out that hypervitamin A may be one of the things, or lack of being able to metabolize it may be one of the contributors to this central nervous system problem with measles. So the bottom line is, I just wanted to, throw that out there that this is really serious business. I know everybody on this call knows that, but if I can add one more anecdote, then that people can use. Thank you. And thank you, Nancy, for your sisterhood.
Well, I will say also
hold
that
on, Sluggo, I have a quick question for Dr. Ruth.
please.
Just to like wrap your point up, and that I thank you for sharing that information with us. That's absolutely stunning and heartbreaking that happened. And I think, and just to kind of put an exclamation point on it, RFK Jr., and then there's also there are various other supposed healthcare officials, like the Surgeon General of Florida, are speaking out against immunization and saying that parents should have the right to control what goes on in their children's bodies, and it's okay to send children to school without these immunizations. As a medical doctor, could you please comment on the importance of immunizations?
Well, thank you. I will just say, I owe a big debt of gratitude to one of the people that, hijacked the news at KPFK for a while, and for all these anti-vaxxers. I've learned a lot. The transmission rate of measles is 95%, meaning if you're around somebody who has it, you have a 95% chance of getting it yourself. And as we know, even in a small, area of Texas where there weren't vaccinations, there were deaths. So all I can say to you is a wonderful thing that I heard on Tom Hartman the other day. A person called in and said, "Here in DeSantistan." So anyway,
Right. Well, I want to point out as a historian that inoculation, which is the term they used, actually originated in what became the United States. In Puritan Boston, there was an outbreak of smallpox, which always happened, and or it may have been malaria, and there was a black African slave who had been brought from Africa, and he was owned by, as they say, by the Mather family, which is the leading family in Puritan Boston. And he knew of inoculation from Africa. And what they did was, and Ruth, correct me if I'm wrong, if you had a smallpox pustule, God forbid, they would put a needle in and then inject it into somebody healthy, but just a tiny amount, just enough to create an immune reaction. And so inoculation actually dates to Puritan Boston in America. And during the Revolution, there was one guy who was totally committed to inoculation, and that was George Washington, because Washington had had smallpox. George Washington's face was all pocked, and he had survived it, and he knew about inoculation. And when the British came in to Boston, he and George Washington inoculated the Revolutionary Army, and the Brits did not get inoculation. And that's why we won the revolution. It had to do with George Washington understanding inoculation. There you go. I mean, it doesn't get more basic than that.
Sluggo, I've asked Dr. Ruth to unmute, but Dr. Nancy, our other MD on staff, is ready to answer your question, I believe. Dr.
Go ahead,
Nancy?
Nancy, please.
The origin of inoculation really began with cowpox, and it was in Great Britain. And there's a very
Well, that we know of. It certainly happened in Africa as well. The African civilization knew about inoculation.
Well, that was in, I think, 1500s.
Yeah.
It began in Great Britain. Anyway,
Okay.
it's interesting that it began with the cowpox, and people infected with cowpox never got the smallpox. And that's really
Right. Okay, good. Thank you for that. But and look up if you would, Nancy, because this story, I was trying to find the guy's name. I'll email it to you, but it's a known story. The slave of the enslaved person of the Mather family was a known figure, and it's been recorded what they did. And they clearly used inoculation to fight this outbreak in Puritan Boston and then in the American Revolutionary Army. No doubt about it. So there you go. Okay. Mike, did you want to add? Then we'll go to Heidi.
We haven't heard from Mila, and then we can hear from Heidi. I'll come up after those two.
Okay, Myra.
Brilliant.
Please.
Let the two brilliant women speak first.
I'm really pleased that Dr. Ruth is with us, and I just want to take a slight detour off of the topic of inoculations because Dr. Ruth, as far as I know, specializes in congestive heart failure. And there has been a lot of speculation among the talking heads that Trump's swollen ankles and the bruises on his hands are indicative of someone who is suffering from congestive heart failure. And I was just wondering if
thank you, Mila. I regret to say, even though of course I had the Hippocratic oath, I regret to say that this is unfortunately not congestive heart failure. He has venous insufficiency, most likely. So, his veins don't work. So the blood pools in his legs, and then it seeps out. And one of our mutual friends that I will tell you, at some point, I can't do it on a public thing, but has that same problem. So what happens is the valves don't return the blood from the legs to the heart. The blood pools in the legs, and then the liquid part of the blood seeps out of the blood vessels under pressure and just makes the legs get, water in them, basically. But it's not, in his case, it's not congestive heart failure. Now, I do have something interesting to say about that.
Well, don't you have to, in order to have congestive heart failure, don't you have to have one?
Well, yeah, I don't know what the hemodynamics are for a stone heart. Maybe you can research that. But I do want to say one thing that I find amusing. And the only thing that he might have, which I don't think he does. Oh, by the bruising, two things are interesting about that. I had heard that he takes aspirin, which, a lot of older people do take baby aspirin prophylactically, but somebody else mentioned, quote unquote, could it have been an IV? And that was an interesting question, because it's conceivable that a doctor may have tried to give him IV Lasix by starting a small IV in his hand and giving him Lasix, a diuretic, to get the fluid out of his legs. It works more quickly than taking a pill for it. So that may be it. And if you puncture the vein, God, for poor Mila knows this, you can get a bruise from that. But the one thing I did want to say is there is something that there's right-sided heart failure that can come from sleep apnea, years of untreated sleep apnea. Now, here's the fun, interesting thing. Apparently, at least during the E.G. Carroll trial, because my nephew was clerking for that judge, Trump kept falling asleep the entire time. So this is during the day, during his own trial. People with sleep apnea fall asleep during the day because they never get a good night's sleep at night. And he's the body habitus. He's the perfect body habitus for it. The problem is, I have a special interest in it as a cardiologist. The way you find out if someone has sleep apnea is because the spouse reports it and says, "Doctor, my husband keeps stopping breathing in the middle of the night." Well, he's going undiagnosed because Melania doesn't sleep with him. But we could ask Laura Loomer.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Well, my wife and I just watched a documentary on Franklin Roosevelt, and they did in him diagnose congestive heart failure way before he died. And you see pictures of Franklin Roosevelt, by the way, at his death, and he looks really old. Franklin Roosevelt was 63 when he died. And, and Teddy Roosevelt was only 60. And these guys were the peak of health. But Franklin Roosevelt, his congestive heart failure was correctly diagnosed before he died. And the one thing I will say, all these documentaries, they show these leaders constantly smoking cigarettes. It's astounding. They never stop smoking. And I'm wondering if Franklin Roosevelt would have lived longer if he'd have stopped smoking those damn cigarettes. I mean, it's just unbelievable, which people don't do now, by the way. We don't see world leaders smoking cigarettes. It was very interesting to me anyway. Mike Hersh, you want to jump in? And we're going to continue with it. We still have 69 people with us. I want to introduce Libby Halevi in a minute. She's got a play opening, and we're going to jump into nuclear with the great Carl Grossman while we still have time. But go ahead, Mike, Heidi, Steve.
Well, I'd like to hear from Heidi first.
Heidi, please.
I have a really quick question. I'm new here still, and I don't know how the organization works yet.
Neither do we, but go ahead.
But I wanted to find out if there is any way that our group could somehow reach out to some of the Epstein survivors and offer them some support and a mouthpiece to be able to.
Absolutely. If we could have
I don't know
somebody come
how to
on,
get in touch with them, but
but
is
we
there
don't either.
anybody?
If anybody has
So
a suggestion, we would definitely welcome any of the Epstein survivors. I will say we have had Bob Petrakis on the call, and Bob Petrakis actually broke some of the first stories about Jeffrey Epstein out of Columbus with his connection to Leslie Wexner. And Bob did receive a death threat from the Epstein organization, but beyond that, he was not definitely not a victim of the sexual stuff. So, and yes, we would welcome at any point an Epstein survivor. No doubt about that, Heidi. A good idea. Steve Caruso, go ahead, please.
I just want to say there's no cholesterol in tobacco. So thank you.
Yes, but boy, it just kills me. And all these documentaries about the Titans, and they're always lighting up a cigarette. And we know that
Right.
Franklin Roosevelt. So I'm wondering if Franklin Roosevelt would have lived longer if he hadn't smoked.
You
You
can
know?
use tobacco as a vehicle to keep you vegan. Think about it that way.
Oh yeah, well,
All
which
right.
which is worse, eating meat or smoking cigarettes?
Eating
That'd
meat.
be an interesting discussion.
Eating meat. There's definitely, I'm telling you, there's so many metabolic substrates in dead meat, animal cells, all the stuff that's in there is just crazy. The hormones, the whole factor your body has to fight off. It takes it's like the war with Ukraine and Russia. It's just a constant
Right.
battle, between meat and your body all the time. And until you quit eating it, the war won't end.
Okay. Well, I stopped in 1970, and I never got hooked on cigarettes or on pot for that matter. But here we are. So listen, this has been an amazing discussion. If anybody else wants to jump in, Sandy Bazinius, I know you had a hand earlier, but this whole idea of compassion and lack thereof, I think to me the real essence of fascism, the core essence of fascism, is a complete lack of compassion and empathy. If there's anything to define fascism, that's it, because it goes right into male authoritarianism and sexual exploitation, all that stuff. But that's my feeling about it. Carrie Larson, you have not spoken to my knowledge.
Yeah, actually, no, I have, but I'm going to speak up if I can speak again. Um, when the medical people and he has talk about his health and they say it's this and that, I don't believe them. I believe that he has to be worse off than he real because he looks really bad. And I also put in chat about Trump, his McDonald's diet, and
Well, I
I
love
just
the fact that Trump referred to J.D. Pritzker, who's the governor of Illinois, who's definitely overweight. But Trump referred to J.B. Pritzker as being a slob. But Trump, my God, but you're right. I don't think his medical condition is what they say. It's very interesting. I've been debating, some right-wing people, and they all point to Biden's health. The first thing you hear anymore is how could we have had a president who was so clearly out of it as Joe Biden?
projection, projection.
I don't know. I don't get it,
He's
and I don't get what the right wing sees in Donald Trump.
I
But
don't either.
well, to
Well, my
me,
husband was saying, since Reagan was president, the Republicans have been dumbing down the country, and that could be part of it. We're taking
yeah.
money away from, you know. But I
Okay.
see that Carl Grossman's on them. Okay.
So we have the great Carl Grossman with us. Carl, you want to mention Libby Halevi's play, and Libby, I think, is on with us. Then we'll go back to Dr. Nancy, who's going to report more on Trump's medical condition. But go ahead, Carl, and tell us about Libby Halevi and this great play.
Yeah, the play is great. I mean, here's the script right here. Atomic Bill and the Payment Due. And it's having its premiere tomorrow. I think Libby had just sent me in the chat a note that she had to run for a rehearsal this evening. But it's a play about the atomic bill is William Lawrence, and he was a science reporter for the New York Times. And there was an arrangement made in 1944 for him to be embedded, the only reporter embedded in the Manhattan Project. But it was far more than him just being there at the Manhattan Project to witness stuff. For example, and this is in Libby's play, when the Trinity test was done, the first test of an atomic device, guess who wrote the press release for the Manhattan Project saying it was an ammunition dump explosion and no one was hurt? And well, he continued after the war to write about nuclear technology in the most glorious ways, nuclear power and nuclear war, omitting in article after article after article, or reducing to maybe a couple of words at most, that word radioactivity. So the play is, it's theater, it's a play. And Libby has, she's been in theater for many, many years. But the reason she got into nuclear technology is that she was staying at a house a mile from the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant when it underwent a meltdown in 1979, and got very into the nuclear issue. And I got involved. In fact, I'm a running character in this play, interestingly enough.
Well, can you put the link, Carl? Could you put the link in the chat so that people can locate this?
Sure. And actually, I'll put a link in the chat, and I'll also put a link in. I've written columns about the play in the last week or so in Counterpunch and various platforms, Nation of Change. And just let me conclude by saying Libby's play is now of interest to, well, this is in my piece, she's gotten requests for presentations in Japan and Germany, here in the United States, the Navajo Nation, very interested, and so forth. So the play may be in your local theater soon. The premiere is a featured presentation in the 50th anniversary celebration of the establishment of the Peace Resource Center at Wilmington College in Ohio. And that's going to be tomorrow evening. Anybody who's living near or around Wilmington College in Ohio, which is near the college I went to, Antioch College, it's free to see it, and I suggest seeing it. It's a very probing, dramatic dramatization of a, well, as the program notes say, the play is described as a true story about media manipulation at the dawn of the atomic age, and the New York Times reporter who sold his soul to get this story. So
okay,
I'll put a link in the chat.
Put the link and stick with us, Carl, because we want to come back to the nuclear issue. I think we had Mila and then Dr. Nancy to continue this discussion. And I'll go back to Carl, talk about some nuclear stuff. Go ahead, Mila.
I'd like to say that I spoke with Libby. I believe that's how you pronounce it, with the accent on the B, a couple of days ago, and she was so thrilled because there are 22 actors who are taking part in this stage read of her play. And she said that they are all so excited and have learned so much. And she was just thrilled at all of the recognition that she's receiving. And I predict that recognition will only grow. I haven't had a chance to read it as Carl has, but I was wondering, Carl, if you could, we talk about the media manipulation that occurred and the cover-up of the dropping of the atomic bomb initially, and the Trinity test and all of that. But can you comment on the role that the New York Times and other establishment media have played. I remember in the 80s reading pieces by Matthew Wald, who was, I think, the science reporter at the New York Times, who, when I was organizing in New Mexico fighting a dump for plutonium contamination waste, I kept reading Matthew Wald kind of extolling the benefits of nuclear power. And I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, well, Matthew Wald is a successor in many ways to William Lawrence. He ends up, when he leaves the Times, working for the nuclear industry. In fact, and this is in the play, Libby gives me a call just when she started her podcast called, oh, great, this is the Counterpunch piece. Again, just download it. It's a very long and detailed piece. Libby gave me a call because of what she said were anomalies, irregularities during the Trinity test. And that's when we first connected. And I said, oh, yeah, News Zero, which was written by a woman, Beverly D. Keever, who was a solid journalist. She worked for the Herald Tribune. She covered the Vietnam War at the front lines for 7 years. She wrote this book, News Zero, the New York Times, and I forgot if it's nuclear power or nuclear whatever, about how the Times from the get-go, from the William Lawrence day, from when General Groves of the Manhattan Project goes to the Times, figuring not that it was the paper of record then, but it was so influential, and makes a deal with Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, publisher of the Times, and Edwin James, its editor, to have this Lawrence go and be embedded in the Manhattan Project. He'd be paid by the government, and meanwhile, according to Beverly D. Keever, his New York Times paycheck would go to his wife. A very corrupt story. And then she goes on in this important book, catch the book, News Zero, about how the Times has, how can I put it, has...
Well, they've been a nuclear booster. They boost nuclear power, and they boost, the idea that radiation doesn't harm anybody or doesn't come out. They were very strong, saying no one was harmed at 3 Mile Island, and they continue to support, this idea of new nuclear plants, which is completely insane. And so, there you go.
Yeah, importantly in the play, again, this is drama, and sometimes sometimes information and can be communicated through drama, best of all theater. And what Libby has in the play is Wilfred Burchett, who was an Australian reporter, a journalist, and he gets into Hiroshima right after the bombs were dropped, and he writes about just the impacts of radioactivity, and there's all through the play interactions between between Burchett, this wonderful Australian reporter, and this what can I call him?
Corrupt. He was a corrupt, a crook. He was a crook, lying about the atomic bombing.
Yeah.
And we still have that. We still have all these atomic sycophants running around saying how nuclear power should get the Nobel Prize. Oh, well, that's Trump. But, that's what we're up against. I want to talk about that with you a little more in a couple minutes. Nancy Naparko had a hand, and then we'll go back to Myla Reeson, and we'll come back to nuclear. We just have about 10, 15 minutes left.
No, I was just going back on the subject.
Oh, so did you want to say anything, Nancy, or want to move on?
Later. Bye.
Okay. We still have 63 people with us. We're going to go to the top of the hour. Myla Reeson, go ahead. Then Mike Hersh.
Well, I'd like to suggest a sequel because Libby is a wonderful dramatist, and maybe she can also breathe some life into the continuing story of journalists who are now promoting nuclear power, as you said, Harvey. It's like for example, we have the esteemed George Monbiot, who is he writes about climate, and he promotes nuclear power. And then,
it's the same.
and then we have, I don't know if you would call Bill McKibben a journalist. And Harvey, maybe maybe he has recanted.
No, he hasn't recanted, but he's softened his. You don't see him. He's still right. Bill McKibben, the father of the 350 movement, has you don't see his stuff advocating new nuclear anymore.
So
And we still get it from some other people. But when I hear people advocating nuclear power, I just say, well, look at the numbers. I mean, the great technological miracle of our generation has been one of them has been the incredible rise of solar and wind. And you cannot make an economic argument that favors nuclear, small or large, in the face of solar or wind, especially with batteries now.
and yet we see so many politicians, policymakers who rely on this propaganda to shore up their advocacy. We've got J.D. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, the two senators from Arizona. The list goes on and on. Michigan, the governor of Michigan, the governor of New York, all promoting nuclear power. And recall, if you recall, we discovered a couple of weeks ago, thanks to Zoran Mamdani, that that Andrew Cuomo is invested in a firm, or he has a financial stake in a firm that is promoting small nuclear reactors, including small nuclear reactors for the moon. So
This is really amazing.
it just continues, and we're really up against some people who are just committed to keeping these
Yes.
threats against against all life.
Well, the worst culprit is Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom, we Californians, we have a thriving, global leading solar industry in the world's fourth largest economy. And there was a agreement, a plan put in place to phase out the two reactors at Diablo Canyon, and Gavin Newsom has betrayed that. He, to me, is the number one nuclear criminal, worse than Trump in many ways, because he's done severe damage to a transition that was right in the middle of happening. You can you can't excuse it, but you can understand it with Trump, who is what he is. But Gavin Newsom portrays himself as a green guy, turns around and prolongs the operation of two reactors that could utterly destroy California, and is doing physical damage to one of the most important industries in the country, which is solar panels. No one has done more damage to the solar industry in the United States than Gavin Newsom, including Donald Trump. And there you go. Mike Hersh, did you want to jump in, and then Heidi, and then we'll continue this just for a few more minutes. Mike?
I just want to kind of focus this discussion now that I have three of the great champions on our screen who have dedicated so much time to educating people about the facts, the threat of nuclear power. The woman who is credited with discovering radium died of cancer.
Marie Curie.
Marie Curie. We've known how dangerous radiation is for generations now. And what we see now is, with the New York Times, these elected officials who claim to be environmentalists, people who claim to be climate activists, who are willfully blind to all this information. And for years and years, I've been accosted by people trying to get PDA to sign on to the thorium reactors, and they're new and improved, and they're going to be safe,
Right.
and all this other nonsense. They don't know that Tim Carpenter, the founder, one of the main founders of PDA, was a no nukes activist from way back, and he got his start in Congress and with John Conyers by going around trying to get members of Congress to sign on to a no nukes petition. What I want to call everyone's attention to, and we're all very smart people, we're all very well informed. I don't think that we can afford to be mystified when these politicians take money and then do the bidding of the nuclear industry.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't think that we can afford to be mystified and say, well, solar is so much more efficient and wind is free and all this other stuff. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. They can't make money off of us if we're selling power back to, Con Ed in the tri-state area or PG&E. You name the power company, Duke Energy, Dominion. These are bad actors. These are not, they know what they're doing. They're trying to make
Right.
a lot of money for their shareholders. They're bribing our politicians. They're ripping us off. They know that they're lying to us about, oh, what are we going to do if it's dark? What are we going to do if the wind's? They know that's all crap. It's all a money game. They're making money by keeping solar off rooftops. They don't want people selling energy back to the utilities. They don't want any of that to happen. It's not macroeconomics, it's microeconomics. And if you
Right.
can see how this is all driven by lies from the beginning, driven by greed. And I want to thank you, Carl, because I think you were the one who pointed out that in your homeowner's insurance, if you're the victim of some kind of meltdown, the insurance policy is worthless. They'll just walk away and you'll be
Right.
left with a radioactive ruin. What we
And
have to understand is that these nuclear power plants cannot be insured by anyone. The Price-Anderson Act is there to protect them from macroeconomics and microeconomics because they are uninsurable because they are unreasonably dangerous. They're incredibly risky. So
right.
what we're seeing here is it's a major con job, and we can't afford to fool ourselves and say, oh, they don't understand, or oh, if they only saw the figures and ran a spreadsheet on how much more efficient renewable. They know all that. They all know. But I think what we really need to do is stop giving them the benefit of the doubt and call them out for being crooks, Democrats and Republicans alike. If they're taking this radioactive money, it's worse than dirty money. They're
Well,
crooks.
it's actually very interesting, in response to the Trump attack on wind power, for example, there's a lot of Republicans who are deeply invested in wind, especially in places like Iowa and Texas.
Oh yeah.
And, Iowa gets well over half its electricity from wind now.
And
And
Texas is like the leading producer of clean, green, renewable
right,
energy
by
because
far.
they've got so much wind infrastructure. And then you have Trump, who's made his career out of blowing hot air, and he's coming against wind. And now he wants to have the Ralph Cramden to the moon, Alice nuclear plant on the moon.
And
They're toying with us. They're trolling
well,
us. And I
Mike,
think I just want to close 1 second, Mila. We really need to get our crap together and start being real serious about this radioactive threat that we're facing. Not just talk about it, but figure out what we're going to do about it and heap shame on these politicians that have sold us out. Mila,
Tatanka
go ahead,
needs,
please.
Tatanka needs to leave in 3 minutes, and so do I.
so okay, Tatanka, real quick, please.
Oh boy, real quick. Okay, one with compassion, one with energy. Tomorrow, you can catch on C-SPAN, and you can learn about this by looking up either the Romero Institute and then going to the New Paradigm Institute, or simply go newparadigminstitute.org. There's a task force hearing in the Senate restoring public trust through UFO transparency and whistleblower protection. These are for these Air Force and mostly Air Force and Navy pilots, but also people in the government that are willing to talk about the secrets that aren't coming out. That's at 7 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. in the Senate, and you can get a link to how to hear about that. This is the work of Danny Sheehan largely. As for compassion and transparency, three of my favorite leaders in the progressive movement we are bringing together on Friday, October 24th, and it's Romero Institute has put this together. People of Americas Unite in the Vets Building in Santa Cruz. And we're bringing together Dolores Huerta, Danny Sheehan, and Chase Iron Eyes. And they're all, to me, three of the most articulate progressive visionaries in our movement. The event is going to start at 4 o'clock at the clock tower. Then it's going to go inside for those three to speak. And then it's going to close with the Brazilian musician Porangi. So that event, you
Let's
can
put
look.
that up, put that in the link, and we have some time for it to talk.
Okay.
So please do that.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Myla, you have to leave also, and then we're going to go back to Carl and talk a little more nuclear. Did you want to say something, Myla? No, I think you're gone already.
I'm not gone. Let's hear from Heidi.
Go ahead.
And Heidi's been waiting.
Go ahead, Heidi, and then I want to mention. We'll go ahead, Heidi, and then we'll come to Carl. And we're almost out of time. So
I'm sorry, Heidi. I just tried to unmute you at the same time you tried to unmute, and there you are.
Go ahead.
Yeah. My question is mostly for Carl anyway, and that is, has anyone heard of Myron Dewey at all? He was a keyboard. I was a keyboard warrior for a lot of his productions out of Standing
I've
Rock.
heard of him. This is the engineer. I've
Gregory,
heard of him.
okay.
Yes, I used to watch him religiously. I'd wait for his prayer before he came on the video. It was so intense and inspiring. But
Yeah.
Write his name. Put his name in the chat, please.
Can you do that?
Okay. I will figure it out.
The reason I'm wanting to bring that up is because I wanted to know if Carl had heard anything about him, because I believe he was run off the road Silkwood style, in regards to his studying about the uranium mining in Nevada, where they were in the middle, which is why I heard the native name in your long list of things, and was wondering if he was one of the people that she's at all mentioned.
No, not in the play.
I think he was run off the road by one of the oil workers in the area during that Standing Rock event.
Right, but it's
okay.
But it's one of those companies. It's still a company that's big and like the nuclear. And if he was studying the uranium mining, then that was an issue that we need to be aware of.
Yes, and I do want to mention also in big picture stuff. I think in future generations, we will remember. Oh, there's Myron Dewey. Okay, we'll remember this past week that the power, economic and political power, and maybe even military, has shifted definitively this last week from the United States, if we even were close to still having it, to China, India, Russia, Iran, North Korea, South Africa, and Brazil. You know, there was this meeting in Beijing where the Chinese, the India, and the Russians got together. And, Trump was all kind of heartsick about being left out. But the bottom line is that a lot of this has to do with renewables, because the number one growth industry on the planet continues to be wind and solar in conjunction with batteries, because the price has continued to drop. And the world market now is totally dominated in solar and wind and in batteries by the Chinese. I mean, the numbers are staggering. China is installing at least as much renewable energy every year as the United States has done in all of its history, even though we originated the technologies. And that means, number one, that China will control this growth industry, and number two, that their power costs, electric costs at home for all sorts of manufacturing, etc., will be way, way, way lower than ours. We're in a position now where new nuclear is 10 times the cost per kilowatt hour as renewable energy. And for China now to be backing up into an alliance with India, which has actually been moving also on renewables, Russia, which is not, but nonetheless, or North Korea, but they are this belt and belt and whatever it is road that the Chinese have developed, and they are just definitively, I believe, this past week is the landmark where you can say that the power on Earth really shifted to China. And you just cannot have the quality of leadership that we have in the United States and think you're going to compete going on into the future. And the other piece of the puzzle, along with wind, solar, and batteries, is automobiles. And the Chinese now have completely taken over electric vehicles. There is I've mentioned it before, the BYD, Build Your Dreams, which has developed technology now they can charge an electric car, the BYD, in 5 minutes for 300 miles, which is less time it takes than it takes to fill a gas tank. The BYD is basically the equivalent of a Toyota Corolla, and it's half the price, literally half the price. So whatever economic future the U.S. thinks we're going to have, I think this past week has been definitively buried. Next week, we are going to talk about Ukraine, and we're going to talk also, there is a very substantial renewable energy movement in Ukraine. And that's a big deal because this is obviously an energy war. It has to do with Putin's dominance of gas and oil. And if the Ukrainians jump out of nuclear, they have 15 reactors in Ukraine, although 6 of them are now controlled by the Russians. But if Ukraine goes to wind and unites with the German wind industry and the Danish wind industry, that is a major shift in European focus to renewables that will be joined by the Chinese and could make a very, very big difference. And that's why one of the reasons we come back to nuclear so much. So that's for next week. And this is for last week, this global alliance. Carl Grossman, you've got a hand, and then we'll go to Steve.
Yeah, I just want to mention, as a journalism professor for 47 years and an active journalist for 60, my concern is media manipulation. And in my book, Cover Up What You're Not Supposed to Know About Nuclear Power, published in 1980, I do this with facsimiles so you can see the actual documents, the interlocks between boards of directors of media companies and nuclear companies. I quote Alden Whitman of the New York Times talking about the reluctance of the New York Times to write about nuclear because it's something the establishment is pushing, and the Times considers itself part of the establishment. I quote Anna Mayo of the Village Voice saying she had her job was based, my job, she says at the Village Voice, was really based on the New York Times neglecting nuclear power. I get into, just to conclude, from the beginning, from the get-go, the nuclear juggernaut focused on how to manipulate the media, how to manipulate the press. And it has decade after decade, and that continues today.
Well, I look forward to the day when the solar industry and the wind industry and the battery industry start buying politicians. I mean, where have they been in the world of corrupt media and legislation? These are big industries now, wind and solar, and they should be having their own lobby here with matching the effectiveness of King Kong, coal, oil, nukes, and gas, which are on their way out. So, Carl, I do also want to point out, by the way, the Cuomo family, partly thanks to Carl's persuasiveness, Mario Cuomo did participate and was a key to shutting the Shoreham reactor on Long Island. And Andrew, when he was governor of New York, did shut Indian Point.
Yeah,
And
but
this is very key to understand and move ahead.
yeah, but then he facilitated a 7.6
I know.
billion. Just wanted, in terms of those charts, the interlocks, all this stuff, the quotes from Anna Mayo, you can get my cover-up book for free. Just go to my website, carlgrossman.com, go to books, hit the little button for books. You can download the book. For very gracious of the publisher for facilitating this. And you'd have the primary documents. Again, I use facsimiles in the book to help in the struggle against nuclear technology, nuclear weapons, and nuclear power.
And Carl has been instrumental in all that. And you can also go and get the Killing Our Own book for free. Ratical, Ratical, is where that's online. But Carl's coverage of the media has been really critical. And Carl, I wish you would use some of your connections and start siphoning money from the solar industry to the journalistic establishment. So these guys will do for renewables what they did for nuclear. Steve Caruso, and then I think we're going to sign off. We still amazingly have 50 people with us. You people have the most amazing attention span. Thank you so much for staying with us. Like I say, next week we're going to go deep into Ukraine and talk about the energy situation there, among much else. And hopefully, maybe we'll get an Epstein victim to talk to us. I also, by the way, talked today, and I'll get you in a minute, Steve, with David K. Johnston. David, and then C-A-Y Johnston. He knows more about Donald Trump's financial history than anybody else. And the reality, and literally, and I met him 10 years ago or so. He writes constantly about it. And he confirmed, and this is critical, and you'll know that a corner has been turned in American politics when this becomes part of the Epstein dialogue. Because Jeffrey Epstein, and I mentioned this 2 hours ago, Jeffrey Epstein was laundering Donald Trump's money. So yes, we have all this sexual stuff and the molestation of these young girls, and it's truly horrible. But the reality is that Epstein was also his link to the mob, and that it was Russian money that Donald Trump and Epstein were laundering, and Epstein was a friend of Putin's, and he was doing money laundering for Putin's mobsters. And that's the other shoe that we're going to see drop. And we'll go into greater detail next week. That's the other shoe that's going to drop with the Epstein files. It's not just the women, it's the money as well. And that is a very, very big deal. Steve Caruso, go ahead.
Yeah, you got the Hyundai plant being raided,
Big
the
deal,
biggest
yes.
raid ever in U.S. history. They arrested all these South Koreans that were engineers, people that were training people in the factory how to use the equipment, and they just go in, and it's like the elephant in the china shop, obviously. Bad
Well, you
metaphor,
mentioned
but
also, we mentioned this earlier, is ICE raiding Hyundai to support the interests of Tesla?
yeah, could be.
Is this a hired attack from Elon Musk against his competitor,
It's a battery. It's
Hyundai?
a battery plant, and you see people driving these Hyundais. The Ion IQ. Tom Hartman drives a version 5 of that. That gets 300 miles per full charge, and they're just falling off the shelf over. And
Well,
they're
I'm
cheap
waiting for a
too, cheaper,
BYD.
I should say.
The BYD, which is the electric equivalent of a Corolla. An electric Corolla, an electric Toyota in this country sells for over 45, 50 grand. I mean, they're not cheap, these cars. In China, the BYD, which is the equivalent of a Corolla, sells for under 20, for
Right.
God's sakes. And they also, by the way, two-way charging. which means if you have a
Right.
house and you put solar panels on your house,
You back your
you're
house
going to
up with
want
your
a battery. You're
Mhm.
going to want a battery, right? But
Well,
if you have,
bidirectional hasn't evolved here in the United States yet. It's still, there's one car, maybe a Nissan Leaf that does it, but bidirectional is not even on the radar, according to Jay Warmke, who does the Solar News every week.
right. So I looked at this
So,
for my house in LA, and we're going to put solar panels on, and I was going to buy a battery.
yeah.
But if I get an electric car, I don't have to buy a battery. If it
Well,
goes
it's not
too
there
late.
yet, though. I mean, we're so slow here. We used to be the engineering capital of the planet, and now where are we? We're a backwater third world country with no initiative because somebody's killing us and our economy and taking away all the progress civilization has made since the American Revolution back in the 1770s.
Well, but next week we're going to dive deeper into what Trump has done to the American economy because it's terminal. I mean, this country really has no economic future now. And a lot of it has, and this attack on our labor force, it's not just an attack on immigrants. Hitler attacked the Jews. But when he was attacking the Jews, he was also in the process of setting up a police state. It wasn't just the Jews that were victimized by the anti-Semitic attacks in Nazi Germany. It was the public as a whole, because everybody, once you establish a terror apparatus, even if it's just aimed at Jews, allegedly, or at brown people here, everybody is terrorized. And, it's not like alligator Auschwitz down in Florida or the other death camps that are in El Salvador. It's everybody that lives in terror of all that. It's not just the brown people. It wasn't just the Jews. So we'll deal with that again next week too. We still have all of you with us. Thank you very so much. Thank you, Steve Caruso, for engineering, Mike Hersh, Myla, Tatanka, everybody for joining in. Does anyone have a last word they want to throw in before we head off to toke up? It is 4:14 California time, and we are about done. Thank you, everybody. Listen.
Heidi had a birthday question for after the recording, so I'll end the recording if you want to stay on. I don't know who it's for or what it is, but
Oh,
I'll go
okay.
ahead and end it.
So,
All
but
right,
listen,
thanks.
everybody, next week we will be back. We're going to deal with more civil liberties and the rise of fascism. We're going to deal with renewable energy. We're going to deal with the green movement in Ukraine, and especially with the economy and what's happened to the United States of America. It is not a pretty picture. And, it could be really, it's happening pretty quick. These job reports this past week are the worst in a long, long time, and it could be Trump's downfall. So we'll talk about all that next week. Oh, and Gary O'Connor, you can give us a talk about next week about Dodger Stadium, and Gary Crane, if you're with us, you can talk about your nonviolent activism. All right, everybody, no nukes.